Good day, everybody. Here we are on day 18, looking at Genesis 19 to 21. Genesis 19 to 21. We're going to get right into this so that we don't go over time on this one. In Genesis 19, what we're looking at is it's the whole thing with Sodom and Gomorrah. We left off with that. We discovered that it's possible to intercede with God. Abraham practiced this. He went to bat for this city, these cities. I don't know what kind of relationship he had with them. I don't know if he knew his nephew Lot had taken up residence there or not, but that's where we had left it off. And here we have the messengers of God who have gone into it, into the city. You know what's happened. We discover that there is a custom. They would be familiar with this when this is being told. The custom that if you are visiting a city, you go into the city square, and somebody would show you hospitality by bringing you home, and that's what they were doing. But Lot knew the nature of the city, and he enticed them. He begged them, pretty well forced them to come home with him. Uh, these messengers actually would have known Lot, and they were more interested in what was going on in the city itself. But Lot brings them home, and and we know what happens there. Uh, the thing is that what we have here is we're discovering that God is a keeper of promises. He's not wavy upon this. He's not iffy about this. If he has promised something, he keeps it, and that's exactly what he does here. He keeps his promise to Abraham. Um, he's not a promise breaker. It's as simple as that. And this is something that we discover as we move through, not just this once, but we're going to end off with more of the things that he did simply because of his word, simply because he promised. So these messengers, they find Lot, they force him out of the city before they destroy it. Now, most of the people look at this city, and they pick on the homosexual lifestyle as the wickedness of the city, and we know that in further scriptures, the scriptures unfold, that this is something that God doesn't accept. It's not part of what He has created. It's not who He is, and that just by the title of that's considered wicked and evil. But what has brought destruction on the city is the injustice. It's the injustice. And that's what he told Abraham. He had to investigate these cries of injustice that had gone up. Um, so when we go forward on this, we see in verse 13 of chapter 19, the Lord has found the cries of injustice so serious that the Lord sent us to destroy it. Now we see just a tiny example. We don't know a lot about these cities, but we see a tiny example of this in the way that the city showed up. The city surrounded the house of Lot um, to attack these strangers. And according to the rules of hospitality, Lot was actually willing to offer his daughters in place of the strangers because they had come under his protection. Now, don't even try to go there with your thinking on that. There's a lot of things in the word that it just doesn't relate to where we are today. It is difficult for us to understand these things. But just understand that in this culture, the protection of the people who come under your roof is absolutely, you sacrifice anything, your very life, you lay it down in order to protect them. And so we see this. These strangers have done nothing. The city has come out to attack them, and this is part of the injustice that we find in these cities, the arrogance, the boldness, the wickedness, the evil that is prevalent in this place. We see this reflected. We don't know how long Lot was there, but I assume that Lot was there long enough for him to raise his daughters in this culture. And so we see it reflected in the ways that Lot's daughters raped him. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They raped their father. And um, it, So that just gives a little bit of an understanding of why destruction had come on the city, to understand that it had reached its pinnacle. There was nothing left. There was no evil left for it to do. It had reached its buckets were full. As simple as that. So here we then go on to Genesis 20. And we find here a relapse. Abraham relapses back into his former way, his former thinking. Some things are changing. It's a progression. We all know that change is a progression. You hang out with God, you progress, you change according to His righteousness. But here we find him falling back on, even though God had promised that he would be his protector. Abraham still falls back down on their old way of doing things. Abraham said to his wife in verse 2, his wife Sarah, she's said of his wife, sorry, Abraham said of his wife Sarah, she's my sister. So King Abimelech of Gerar took her into his household. She must have been a fine looking lady, because even in her old age, everybody seems to want her. So, but here we find the old way of doing it. Now, the thing is that God's just not going to put up with this. And so we find in verse 3, but God appeared to Abimelech. That but is, yeah, but God appeared to Abimelech that night in a dream and said to him, you are as good as dead because of this woman you have taken. She is a married woman. Wow. So innocence is not always an excuse with God. So this he shows up. There's no way. In Egypt, it took a little while before he spoke to the king then about the situation. But in this, it was that night. Yeah, no. This and why so quick? Is it because Abraham had already received the revelation that God was his protector? Interesting. So in verse 6, we find that it's not that God is trying to be mean in this way to the king. He's just telling him the facts. This is the way it works. You touch her, you're dead. So he has here. God said to him in the dream, "I know that your intentions were pure when you did this. There was no malice involved in this. I know your intentions are pure. In fact, I kept you from sinning against me." I kept you from sin. In his innocence, in his lack of malice in this, God took steps to protect this king from sinning against him. Let's just appreciate that for a moment. Let's just appreciate that. He goes on, that's why I didn't allow you to touch her. So he intervened somehow, that he didn't allow him to touch. He just intervened there. Now return the man's wife. He's a prophet. He will pray for you so you may live. But if you don't return her, okay, now that I've told you this, now that you know the situation, like you're no longer innocent in this. But if you don't return her, know that you and everyone with you will die. Okay, you're innocent in this. I've protected you. It's over now. Return her. If you don't, you're going to die. Hmm. So Abimelech gets up, explains everything to his household, his servants, everybody else. They all flip out, and they come to Abraham. They come to Abraham with sacrifices, offerings, with gifts, with all kinds of things. And so here, this is what Abraham's in the wrong here. Abraham is in the wrong, but he's still anointed. Abraham is in the wrong, but he's still anointed. He didn't follow through on God being his protector. He didn't trust him in that. But his calling is irrevocable. He is who he is. And as far as God told Abimelech that Abraham is a prophet. And so he has Abraham step into his role now to pray for these people, to pray for them. These people are suffering because of Abraham, but yet they have to come to Abraham to find relief. Can you imagine how Abraham is standing there realizing that he has caused this, but yet he at the same time he's the one who has to pray over them. And it's God. It's God's reminder. It's God's way of bringing correction by reminding Abraham who he is in relationship with him. So Abraham prayed in verse 17. Abraham prayed to God, and God restored Abimelech, his wife, and his women servants to health, and they were able to have children. So we see here, this is again proof that the creator is not one who just like created and walked away. He's not one who created, and he is very interactive what's going on, especially because he is guiding his plan forward. Let's keep that in mind. He is guiding his plan forward. He's intervening this way. He's protecting this way. He's providing this way. He's doing all these things because he's ensuring that his plan is going forward. Nothing's going to frustrate his plan. So we see here how he intervened. Because of the incident with Abraham's wife Sarah, the Lord had kept all of the women in Abimelech's household from having children. That was his intervention. That was his protection. That's what he did. So we're learning stuff here, people. We're learning about the creator. We're learning he's got a plan. He's working on a plan, and he's working that plan. He's bringing that forward. He's doing what needs to be done to bring that plan forward, even when Abraham messes up, even when Abraham doesn't rise up to the occasion and be who he's supposed to be. God is still there, and that plan is going to go forward. Then we find one of the saddest things, and this would have been so hard for Abraham here. And there's a number of things that Abraham is has to do, in all of this. You got to understand that this is not the easiest relationship to have. Relationship with God is not always the easiest thing, and he's called upon to do some difficult things. And here's one of them. Sarah has complained about Ishmael. Yeah, Ishmael wasn't behaving the best, and Sarah saw it, and Sarah wants him gone. I mean, that's a mama bear, isn't it? Protecting her son at whatever cost. Protecting. She goes to Abraham, lays down the law. Okay, she just lays down the law and says, "This is how it's going to be." And God actually has to come to Abraham and said, "Follow, follow her directions. Follow what she's telling you." And man, the heaviness that would have been on Abraham. This is his son. This is his firstborn. But God promises him. He says, "Look, you have to reject him. You have to send him away, but I'm going to be with him. He's from you. He's your son, so he's going to be great too." He says in verse 13, "But I will make of your servant son a great nation too, because he is also your descendant." Everything around Abraham is a blessing. Everything has the overflow. Everything is about multiplication in the realm of Abraham. So then we're just going to end up with, well, not yet, almost. I want to point this out because we have a tough time understanding the ages of people. It's like David later on. We'll read David killing Goliath, and everybody pictures him to be like a 9-year-old boy, and David was not. He was a young man. So here, this is really weird, and I don't understand this because uh, Ishmael is 14, 15 here. 14. He's about 14 here. Yeah, he was 14 when Isaac was born. So he's 14 years old. So I don't understand this verse. In verse 14, Abraham got up early in the morning, took some bread and a flask of water, and gave it to Hagar. He put the boy in her shoulder sling and sent her away. Man, I don't know. Were 14-year-olds smaller back then? But why would she need to carry a 14-year? Later, uh, when I don't think I have the verse here. Actually, I do. Okay, so let's just look at this in verses 17 to 20. Okay, here the reason I'm including this is again we see God intervening to keep His promise. He promised Abraham that Ishmael would become great, but He has to get him there. It's not going to happen um, just by coincidence. God has to be interactive here with him. He has to intervene. He has to protect. He has to provide to get him to that place of greatness. So sometimes when you look at different people in the church and you're thinking they have some natural talent, man, natural talent only gets you so far. Doors have to be open. There has to be blessing. There has to be protection. There has to be anointing. There has to be all these sort of things that get people to where God wants them to be. He is very active with us. We see that. You should understand that. We understand it more than what Job understood, or we see that here. And look, God had heard the boy's cries, and God's messenger called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, Hagar, what's wrong? Don't be afraid. God has heard the boy's cries over there. Get up, pick up the boy, and take him by the hand. Take him by the hand, because I will make of him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. She went over, filled the water flask, and gave the boy a drink. God remained with the boy. He grew up, lived in the desert, and became an expert archer. Now, the reason I share this with you is again so you can see the intervention of God here. He does stuff to get people to where he wants them to be. As a side note, just because of what I mentioned about the sling, here God God doesn't pick up this boy and put him in the sling. He says to her, "Take him by the hand. Take him by the hand." I don't know. Is there something significant there? Is there something that we as parents want to keep our kids little, and God sees more in them than what we do? That's just a thought. That just was there. I don't want to take away from the purpose of this is to understand that God intervenes. So yeah, there's a lot there again today. A lot to unpack, a lot to understand, a lot to move forward on, and we can be thankful that God took the time to reveal Himself to us, even if it was over thousands of years. He got us there, and we sit in a position that Job never sat in and Abraham didn't sit in. We have this wonderful stuff. Okay, so you guys have a blessed day. Okay, be blessed. Let this work through in your thinking and your understanding, and I look forward to tomorrow when we get to spend some more time together. God bless.